May God open our eyes to see, our ears to hear, and our hearts to love. Amen. Once a year on this last Sunday before Lent, we observe Transfiguration Sunday, and we tell this story. The story of Jesus going up to the top of the mountain with his 3 disciples, Peter, James, and John. And when he got to the top, he was transfigured, and his face shone like the sun, and his clothes were dazzling white. And then Moses and Elijah, 2 leaders of God's people from centuries earlier, appeared too. And as at his baptism, the story that we told at the beginning of the season of Epiphany, God's voice says, "This is my beloved, my own. Listen to him." Transfiguration is not a word that is used in everyday speech. Until a few years ago, most people who do not attend church had quite likely never heard of it. But J.K. Rowling, author of the Harry Potter books, changed that. Harry Potter fans know about Transfiguration. Transfiguration is a subject taught at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. It's taught by Professor McGonagall. In her class, students learn to change one thing into another, like a mouse into a teacup. It's known to be a difficult class at Hogwarts, since there are so many variables: the mass of the object, the strength of the wand, and the witch or wizard's powers of concentration. Students at Hogwarts start slowly, first changing things like matches into needles, and gradually they work their way up to transfigure larger objects, a chair to a cat, a teapot to a tortoise. Professor McGonagall was so skilled at this that she could transfigure herself from a human to a cat and back again. Transfiguration in Harry Potter is magic. So is what happened to Jesus on the mountain magic? Did he learn some sort of spell that allowed him to suddenly change his appearance and that of his face and his clothes? I don't think it was magic. I don't think it was a trick. But I do think that those who saw whatever it was might have described it as magical. I think that they knew it was beyond rational explanation, and so I will not try to rationally explain it. Peter, James, and John saw a spectacular vision. It was a brief moment when the light of God was truly visible in Jesus. It was a moment when God shone through in all God's glory. And they heard the voice of God proclaim, "This is the beloved, my own. Listen to him." But as quickly as the vision came, it was gone. They look up and Moses and Elijah have vanished. The voice is silent, and Jesus' face and clothes are not shining anymore. Like so many God moments, it was over. So quickly. In Tennessee Williams' play, A Streetcar Named Desire, the main character, Blanche, has a strange line. In a moment of tense, complex intimacy, of an illicit yet life-giving kiss, she says, "Sometimes there's God so quickly." Sacred space, thin places, God moments come quickly. We get a momentary glimpse of the divine looking at a spectacular sunset or a dramatic storm, as some of us experienced last night, or listening to music that touches our soul, or in the face of a young child, the touch of a lover, or in the resilient eyes of a refugee beginning again in a new land. We get a glimpse, but as quickly as it comes, it goes away. Sometimes there's God so quickly, oh, so quickly, and it's gone. All of the great religions of the world emerged out of encounters with the divine that radically changed the lives of those who encountered the holy. They were transfigured, and their experiences gave birth to the great faith traditions that we value today. The moment of insight, of awareness that we associate with Transfiguration only has power because while the event might be fleeting, its impact is not. What happens in the encounter with the holy shapes people and leads them to live differently because of the power that they have experienced and the reality that they have glimpsed. So Transfiguration has both dramatic and gradual elements. And the idea of Transfiguration as a process raises the question for us, what does transfigured life look like? Today's readings are about glory and transformation. They invite us to see ourselves, our world, our lives as thin places, transparent to the divine. They invite us to imagine ourselves as transfigured persons, thin and translucent to the divine. The transfiguration of Jesus in this story occurs in a thin place. Historically, mountaintops have been seen as places of revelation. For the ancients, they were literally, figuratively, and spiritually closer to the heavens than the valleys or the flatlands. Thin places are places of perspective and visions of the far horizons of the divine. The disciples are invited in this moment to see the fullness of Jesus' humanity. For full humanity is what divinity is. On the mountaintop, divine light shines through the cells that make up his body as well as his soul. While we seldom see the inner light of our companions, the story of Jesus' transfiguration invites us to look for more in ourselves, in other people and creatures, and in the earth. Indigenous Australians know that there is spirit life in the red rocks and red earth of Australia, that there are revelations to be found in the commonplace. The whole earth is filled with God's glory. In the words of poet Gerard Manley Hopkins, the world is charged with the grandeur of God. David White, in the poem that we heard the voice of the world speaking out. Perhaps it might be helpful if rather than thinking about the transfiguration of Jesus as something weird, something magical even, that happened to him and to the disciples, it might be helpful if we were to think about transfiguration as a process and as a practice. Rather than telling a story in which Jesus is so totally other than us, we might hear this story as an invitation to our own transfigured lives. The Eastern Orthodox Christian tradition has perhaps the most robust conception of what it may mean to practice transfiguration. They call this practice theosis, or divinization. To begin to reflect on what practicing transfiguration could mean and look like today, I thought about Marianne Williams' book, A Return to Love, in which she writes, "Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that frightens us most. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There is nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine, as children do. We were born to manifest the glory of God that is within us. And it's not just in some of us, it's in everyone. And as we let our light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. And we are liberated from our own fear. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence liberates others. One of my central faith convictions is that following the way of Jesus is more important than admiring Jesus or believing stuff about him. Williamson's words illuminate a way not only of being awestruck by a mountaintop experience 2,000 years ago, but also of following Jesus, along with all the women and men of faith before him and those that came after him, in a practice of transfiguration, the practice of allowing the light of God's love to shine through us. I do not think that it's a coincidence that Moses, Elijah, and Jesus all experienced God on a mountaintop. Withdrawing to a space that is sacred to us, a thin place, is a life-giving practice. You probably have places in or near Sydney where you experience that something more. Places you go either on your own or with a close friend or a group of close friends. North Head, on the other side of Sydney Harbour, is my Sydney thin place. In New Zealand, it is in the land of central Otago, around Lake Wanaka and Lindis Pass. In the USA, it is the wilderness of Ghost Ranch in New Mexico. That is my holy land. But also, in some peculiar way, so is Manhattan, with its diversity and its energy and its madness. So when we pray and meditate, or go on a retreat, or gather to worship, or simply open our eyes and our hearts to life around us in the city, we are beginning to practice transfiguration. Such contemplative practices are ways of letting go of our ego, the masks that we wear, our busyness and our distractions. These practices of prayer, presence, and worship open us from our isolation to connect us with the divine presence, but also to one another and to the sacred earth. We each reflect different aspects of the image of God, and practicing transfiguration allows God's image to shine more brightly through us in all our uniqueness and our diversity. However, an experience of transfiguration is no guarantee that our troubles will stay away. Just as Elisha had to deal with the loss of Elijah and the responsibilities of the mantle and the blessing, Jesus, after the mountaintop transfiguration, still had to turn his face toward Jerusalem, where his civil disobedience, his religious disobedience, his resistance at Passover against the powers that be, led to his tragic martyrdom at the hands of the Roman Empire. And the disciples likewise were unable to avoid this drama of suffering. In the midst of personal and political realities, contemplative practices open us. That's what the practice of transfiguration looks like. And if we can make it happen in our lives, regularly carving out some time and space in our busy lives, simply to be with God and to allow God to be present with us, our lives may be transfigured and transformed. So we hear again this ancient story on the last Sunday of the season of Epiphany, which is also the last Sunday before the beginning of Lent that happens on this Wednesday, on Ash Wednesday. Like Jesus in the Gospel of Mark, we are poised to begin the journey to the cross. Like him, we need spiritual resources to make that journey. As the season of Epiphany, of showing forth, comes to an end, we reflect on this powerful story. And we are reminded that for Christians, Jesus is the ultimate epiphany, our unique revelation of God among us in human form. In Jesus, as Christians, we believe that we see the most complete human expression of divine presence. With that insight, we conclude Epiphany and open ourselves to the challenges of Lent. Blessed be.